This is Tall Tale TV, your podcast for sci-fi and fantasy short stories. Today I'm going to try something different. I was approached by author-narrator DW Draffin, and he asked if I might be interested in posting one of his audio short stories. So here it is.
The Seething. Written and narrated by DW Draffin. March 12th, 2018. This is my daily journal. Dr. Kieslock said, "Mr. Desai, it's for your human thoughts. It will help you remember what it is to be a man." My first human thought to write down is a thought I didn't have today, but it's the most human thought I still have and the one I think about the most. It was the day I was bitten, which was probably the most human I've ever felt. I guess it isn't a thought as much as a memory. Those are hard to tell apart these days. March 18th. I forgot to write down what the memory was. And then I forgot about this whole journal for almost a week. To focus on this, putting words on paper, talking about feelings I almost never have anymore, and I can barely express these feelings in words. Words. Words are like wisps of smoke in a dark room, and I'm clutching at each one only to have it disperse. Like my soul, I suppose. At least that is what the red shirts claim. I need a different job. I'm tired of stacking traffic equipment at the facility. I need to work with more than my hands. And now I'm hungry. Ravenous. March 20th. I forgot to do it again. This time, I will write down the memory before I return to the Seething. I swear I will. And when a Longtooth swears something, he better mean it. So, I was 19, a runaway from the sad suburbs, living under the overpass. No, I wasn't really living there. I'd only been there a few days, and the people I was with, no, I don't remember them anymore. I just remember that they led me to John Foster, living down there in his box, a shirtless bum in his 50s with a drinking problem, thick and hoarse, but harmless. He didn't mind getting kids drunk if they paid for it, and we brought spray paint. Oh, yes, that's right. We tatted the side of that concrete right up, flaring letters of R. Jimbo and Raz in white and yellow and red. We thought it looked so fresh. And then John Foster came back. March 22nd. I had a good, strong human thought today. I had a feeling of pride when I got my new job. We never really feel pride. I've been reading other Longtooth journals, and this is what one said: pride only comes from doubt. You can only really celebrate something that wasn't supposed to happen. But if you're always sure of success, as every Longtooth is, then you can never be proud. Instead of pride, we possess, in the words of Juliet Marais, a haughty grandeur. We sneer and condescend. There is no room in our cold hearts for pride. Those words really struck me. March 28th. So here is my normal day. I realized I should write it down in detail, because someday I might have years of this journal, and my daily routines might change. So, I should document my days like Dr. Kieslock said. My current life. I suppose the day begins at dawn. So at that time, I'm in the shower, taking a long, hot one, my eyes closed. Then I dry my alabaster skin with a soft towel and clothe it in silk, careful not to wake Audrey. She sleeps restlessly, but I'm quieter than a cat. I'm finding, by the way, that it's easier each day to write in this journal. It's like a muscle that has to be strengthened. If I can just remember to do it every day, then maybe I could actually make inroads into the field of darkness that fills me. I could leave footprints made of light, and bring some of my human self back. April 17th. The seething always hits me so hard in the spring. I work like a demon, and they drive me like a slave, harnessing my frenzy and directing it. I can't even remember the last time I thought as a man. According to the journal, it's been almost 3 weeks. And now I see in its pages all the stories I've started and never finished. I have to write them down before I forget them entirely. They're the core of what it means to be human, and I almost forgot what that was the last few weeks. That sucked. The first memory I must set down is what happened the night John Foster came back. We were tagging the concrete wall, and we heard him come up behind us, calling out in the dark. But his voice wasn't ragged anymore. It was soothing instead, like water over gravel. And he stepped into our light, his eyes dark, his chin dripping blood. A giant, angry purple welt on the side of his neck was already beginning to heal itself, to leave nothing but 2 black bite marks. I remember he held his hands up like claws, with blue flame at each fingertip. He laughed and beckoned to us. "Hey, boys, you'll never guess where I've been," he said, his voice all wicked. Ronald James dropped his can and took off at a dead run, but my instincts were slower than that. I just stared at him. I'd heard of vampires spreading like a disease, but I hadn't really believed it. Too bad for me. April 20th. I was talking about my day. Stay on task. After my shower, I dress, usually in business formal with the work I now do. It's all Italian suits and cufflinks. I mean, we have the look. We can't help it. We're both more than human and far less. In my case, I look rather vulpine, with upswept hair and a long aquiline nose. I'm almost a foot taller, a bit gaunt, and my mouth is filled with fangs. At this point, aren't they just a waste of resources? They make it hard to speak, and they're such a pain to clean. If I'm not going to be flying through the dark biting people's necks, then really, what good are they? I finish my toilet and take a shot of SE16, pure and clean and heavily subsidized by government assistance. It fills me with a sizzling, soothing calm, like taking an antacid on a burning stomach. The seething recedes and becomes more manageable, enough for the next 8 hours at least. And each new recipe lasts longer and gives greater relief. Ah, science. Ha! I didn't used to sound so arch. I guess I'm beginning to sound like all the other long tooths. It's because of my new job. Success there requires my charm and facile tongue, my uncanny power over those who don't arm themselves against me. I feel a different kind of seething in those meeting rooms, and the man in me can't remember a single thing I do there. But I can see now how it is making me grow. If I can start to access the man in me more easily, and my word muscles continue to strengthen, then I realize how far I still am from being human if I'm saying things like word muscles. April 21st. I ran for 2 days. I just ran. And when I stopped, I was right back under the highway, crouched beside John Foster's box. My hands were dirty. My feet were bare, my clothes ragged at the edges. I had no memory of anything. I had just tried to run away from that burning bite on my neck and failed. If the army had taken a day longer to find me, I'd have killed a man. I'm sure of it. I'd have drunk someone's blood and crossed over from monster to murderer, from victim to predator. They killed on sight any vampire who had already tasted human blood. It was a war, and if they hadn't come before the plague of vampires swept the world, the war would have been lost. The seething would have taken us all if it wasn't for the development of SE16. The soldiers arrived in a roar of diesel and blaring searchlights that hurt my eyes. I bounded away like a jackrabbit. A shout from below, the muzzle flash of a rifle, the harmless tug of bullets across my shoulders. I fled across an abandoned lot with their Humvees crashing after in a cloud of dust, machine guns roaring. Their snipers finally brought me down, darts filled with serum that drained the blood from my vision and flight from my legs. Soldiers in hazmat suits processed me. I was shriven with a cheek swab and a gene assay. They pronounced me clean of any crime. Someone who might be of use. A perfect candidate to enter the workforce. April 23rd. Today, I almost got fired. They have me on remote assignment, doing the work of about 20 men. It's a sales and promotional team for a convenience food distributor. Very big account. There's a regional conference in New Bedford. Huge deal every year. They ordered me to pull out all the stops. At this point, I'm mostly managing the team. Sure, they resent me for replacing 80% of their colleagues, but I get the job done and make it easier on everyone left. I finalize production for all the digital media across every platform before lunch. Work that would take them a week to get done. With my new language facility, I develop slogan and branding campaigns as easily as breathing. My brain is just so devious and clever these days, and I never get tired and never need to sleep. But today they gave me more than even I could handle. On top of the phone calls and emails and putting out of small fires all across the agency, I also do the physical loading and unloading of our production trucks, all the cables and lighting and sound gear, all the chairs and tables and signage. It's back in the warehouse and properly sorted within minutes. When the humans try to help, they just get in my way, and they would take forever. In many ways, I don't miss being human. They seem almost toad-like from this end, sad sacks of fat and hopelessness, knowing they only get a good 40 years before they wither and die. No wonder the red shirts hunt us and hate us for our immortality. I'd hate vampires too if I was still human, but that choice wasn't given to me. So I was hauling amplifiers off the tailgate and speaking to a team meeting from the Orlando office while Midia, my assistant, short and little, brown skin with pretty Asian eyes, I have no idea how long she'll last, hovered at my elbow. "We need you to solve a staffing problem here in Scranton right now," she told me in her throaty voice. "We've got 2 managers home sick and another out for surgery. Karlstein, the VP, is on the road in a different time zone and—" But then Jeffson walked up. He's from accounting, very senior, and he started talking to me about my financial methods. "Your shell game," he rumbled in distaste. "I'm maximizing the company's resources," I answered with a cold smile, suppressing the impulse to hand him the 400-pound speaker cabinet in my arms. I pushed past him into the unlit warehouse. He paused at the door, unwilling to follow a Longtooth into a dark room. "You're going to get us all arrested." I returned to the truck. "Well, this is the price of working with Longtooths, isn't it? SE-16 can only restore my moral barometer so far." Jeffson exchanged a look of dread with Midia. She pressed her mouth into a line and looked at me with more calculation, as if measuring my morality like an ingredient for a recipe. What keeps me here, working so hard for such little reward? I suppose it's just a willingness to belong, to stay here in this human world and not be hunted to extinction by a howling mob. Is that too much to ask? I continued in a more reasonable tone. "I mean, the evils I commit are far more minor now. Tax evasion and marketing doublespeak instead of drinking human blood and hunting down virgins." But Jeffson didn't like that answer. He screwed up his courage and said in a shaking voice, "Don't be flip with me, Mr. Desai. I've put in 22 years at the agency, and I'm not going to let you destroy it, you monster. I'm going on record with my findings to Holly. I'd get my documentation in order if I was you." He backed away, and when he felt he was at a safe distance, turned his back on me and left. I smirked at Midia. To my surprise, she smirked back. "Holly," she shrugged. "Dr. Holly is still the CEO, although I can't imagine for too much longer. He's politically very vulnerable, and he doesn't even realize it." I lifted a stack of truss and tossed them with a loud clatter through the warehouse door. "I could take over this entire agency in like 12 minutes and run it with 1,000,000 times the efficiency if they'd only let me, but God forbid they let a Longtooth actually own or operate anything." "Yeah, that ain't gonna happen," Midia agreed. "Now, about the Scranton office." Later, after a hastily called afternoon meeting, Holly came down on my side, but just by a hair, which made Jeffson threaten to resign. To mollify him, Holly made me sign a contract that claimed full responsibility for the accounting shenanigans, but of course I flashed a bit of my charm, not enough for anyone to actually notice, and got them to agree to my addendum that sounded very reasonable, but in actual fact will absolve me, in a very technical legal sense, from actual liability. Fools. But it all pushed my schedule way too late. I still had to rebuild an organizational chart for HR and inventory the entire warehouse and cook a dinner banquet for the management team who had reached their quota goals for the financial year. By the time I'd finished cleaning the conference rooms and kitchens, the sun had gone down. And for Longtooths these days, being out after dark is very bad news. I work downtown, and the house is 15 miles out, behind the Fox Hill Country Club. That's an hour on highways during rush hour, each driver a possible redshirt or random maniac who hates Longtooths for whatever reason. It's always at night that we get into trouble. I don't need to get run off the road. I just want to go home and hope that Audrey has made dinner tonight and it actually tastes good, or that my kids will speak to me. I guess I should have mentioned them before. Perhaps that's why they don't speak to me. I don't mean for them to be an afterthought. It's just that everything is. We're kind of withdrawn from each other's lives, and now that they're teenagers, we're even more so. We've never been close. I gave them security and a good life. They got a monster for a father who will outlive them and never truly love them. Audrey considered it a good deal. I just wanted a safe, normal life and some structure, so I did too. I got home safe tonight, at least. Audrey had made a roast, and it was nice and red, though now cold. Jared and Kim actually sought my approval over a plan they have for a holiday this summer. Hawaii, or Mexico, or something. They were so excited, but I can't remember which it was. All I could think of was the blaring sun on some tourist beach, human skin everywhere, my pale body lathered with sunscreen lurking in the shadows of palm trees with buzzing mosquitoes. No, thank you. But it was a fine evening with the family, and eventually reminded me of this journal. After they had all gone to bed, I took my final shot of SE16 for the day and went down into my basement to scrawl these few pages in the cold and the dark. Another human thought fills me now. Satisfaction. I have finally finished a story for once. April 24th. Being bitten is by far the most painful thing I have ever endured. Nothing will ever, ever, ever come close to that. In the movies, it seems like some kind of rapturous climactic swoon in the arms of an exotic lover. But in reality, it was far from that. It was the stinking breath of an old bum and his impossibly strong embrace. He shook me like a pit bull killing a rat. Then it was fire in my neck and veins. It was murder from the inside out. It was the eternal curse. But apart from that unbearable event, The second most painful thing I've ever suffered happened tonight. I was able to get home the night before without any trouble, but it must be because the red shirts watched me after all, planning an ambush for tonight instead. They have to be so careful the way they do these things. If they can't frame me just the way they want, then they can't drive a stake into my heart. No probable cause. So they always have to manufacture some. I was on Exeter, passing the self-storage lot on the right, when a tractor-trailer backed out in front of me and blocked the entire road. I waited behind the wheel of my Mercedes, hidden by my tinted windows, listening to Rachmaninoff, waiting for the road to clear. I felt more annoyance than alarm. It was still a good 20 minutes before sunset. But the driver got hailed by the security guard from the complex, and they fell into an argument over some papers on a clipboard, and the shadows stretched longer and longer. Cars backed up behind me and began to honk. The driver and security guard ignored them. I was 4 blocks from home. A woman in a trashy little Mitsubishi behind me lost her patience and peeled out past me onto the lawn of the house to the left. A young guy in a truck had the same idea at the same time from the far side of the tractor-trailer, and they met in a crash on the lawn. It crushed the hood of the Mitsubishi and rocked the truck up and over onto the wall of the house, shattering the living room window. An old lady in a housecoat rushed out of the house, screeching at them. The young guy jumped out of the truck and threw his baseball cap at the Mitsubishi, yelling at the woman inside. She yelled back, but she couldn't get out of her car. It was pinned between the front of the tractor-trailer, the old woman's house, and the truck on its hood. Everyone got out of their cars. Numerous onlookers called 911. I sat in my leather seat and watched them from behind my dark windows. I sipped from a water bottle and waited. Rachmaninoff crescendoed and ended. Then the Mitsubishi caught fire. The arguments stopped and everyone pulled away from the growing blaze. Fear squeezed all their faces, making them even uglier. The old lady started collecting cats in her fat arms. People rushed into her house and came out with houseplants. The woman in the Mitsubishi began pummeling the window of her car with weak, useless fists. Smoke began to obscure her. With a sigh, I finally opened my car door. A murmur of relief and disgust rippled through the crowd of 20 bystanders. I skirted the fire, not wanting my clothes to get damaged, and leapt lightly onto the hood of the Mitsubishi. I lifted the front of the truck, the metal squealing as it scraped across the grill of the tractor-trailer, the fender hot in my hands. I could hear sirens in the distance, but of course they were taking too long for the woman in the car to survive. I pushed the truck back with a grim heave, flipping it onto its back, and turned back to her. She stared up at me with a look of hatred and terror. I tore the roof off the Mitsubishi with my left hand and reached into her car with my right. But something was off. I could tell immediately. The smoke smelled too sweet. I lifted her with one hand bunched in her collar, my misgivings growing, and that's when I heard the voice behind me. "Just what the hell do you think you're doing, you abomination?" I turned, in perfect tableau, holding a screaming woman who twisted in my grip. From the corner of my eye, I could see that the fire and smoke came from a cheap special effects machine in the footwell of the passenger's seat, something rented for haunted houses on Halloween. "Stop him!" the woman in my grasp screamed, scratching at my hand. "Stop him! He wants to drink my blood!" They all stood there on the lawn, the drivers and the security guard and even the old lady. They all had their phones up, recording me, getting it on record how the horrible vampire was trying to kill the innocent maiden. I saw that the only one who didn't have his phone up was a big man in a rugby shirt, holding a pointed stick. Now, there are very specific rules in these situations. Longtooths have almost zero rights, but we don't really need them. The idea of any single human, or even any group of humans, being strong enough to overcome one of us is laughable at best. It's a well-known fact that a stake can never be driven into the heart of an unwilling vampire. But if we are caught hunting humans, then it's a whole different matter. The entire might of the United States Army and police and security forces will be bent to our capture and execution. It still happens from time to time. Longtooths can get tired of this life. They can stop taking their SE16 and revert to the Seething. When that happens, the result can be like that of a suicidal man looking for a cop to kill him. Sometimes in these situations there are innocent victims. These only fuel the hatred of the red shirts and others like them. And sure enough, the jackets of the people facing me were being pulled off, sweatshirts and coats dropping to the ground to reveal a crowd of T-shirts, all red. Black Gothic crosses marked those whose objections were mostly religious. Other symbols declared their allegiances, their particular claim against living in a world with Longtooths in it. They hated us for taking their jobs, their women, their spotlight. They hated us for living longer and healthier. They hated us for being better in 1,000 different ways. I dropped the woman. She wrapped her arms around my legs. I couldn't break free of her grip without hurting her, which is just what they wanted. The others fell on me like a frenzy of red rats, pulling me onto the lawn. They beat me and kicked me, the woman still wrapped around my legs, preventing any escape. I took out my phone and began recording them as well, using my offhand to ward away the worst of their blows without injuring anyone. Seeing that my phone recorded their attacks only enraged them more. Hands pulled at me from behind, trying to lay me flat on the grass. If that happened, then I knew I was done. It wasn't very hard to resist them. It wasn't very hard to tune out their insults either. I had to focus instead on being calm, on not letting the Seething take me, on somehow escaping this before the sun's last rays faded from the sky. I wished then that I had spent more time learning to change my shape. I'd never felt much use for the form of a bat or a spider or a wolf. I'd never thought to delve deeply into the occult and master the spells other Longtooths used. I'd relied on the easy things, the strength and the stamina and the cleverness that came without any work at all. I hadn't wanted to become any less human than that. That was why I had started seeing Dr. Kiesloch to begin with. I heard his words in my ear. "Mr. Desai, you can never be human again. But trying to be is the only hope you have left. You must try, knowing you will fail. That is the only way you will ever be allowed to live each day among us." I stood there like a statue and took their beatings. The big man with the stake tried to wade through the crush to drive it into my chest. I pushed people between us to keep the horrible thing away from me. The sky grew dark just as the sirens washed the night with red, white, and blue lights. The police pulled them off me. The red shirts howled at losing their prey. The woman clamped around my legs had to be tasered before she could be removed. Her eyes were filled with a kind of madness I've never seen, not even in other Longtooths. That staring, feverish gaze haunted me as the cops pushed me into their squad car and drove me away. Those burning eyes filled with even more hunger than I'd ever know. April 25th. Audrey brought me my journal and a change of clothes here in jail. I have my own cell, of course, and their jumpsuits hardly fit. I've been remanded into the custody of an FBI team, and they've allowed me to keep a suit on. The feds always understand just how valuable Longtooths are for the economy. A senior agent named Bolton, his hair crew-cut and gray, sat with me for an interview. He thanked Audrey for bringing my things and then asked her to wait outside. "You can't go back. You realize that, don't you?" Go back. For some reason I thought he meant to the scene of the crime, as if I had the intention of retrieving my Mercedes. "To your old life. We're moving all of you. Your job, it's finished. Your family, they can't stay here. Your house will be burned to the ground. It might be anyway." I took a deep breath and searched within me for sorrow, for loss, for anger at being so unjustly used. But I could only dredge up a bittersweet ennui. I shrugged. "I understand. We have a place for you. The FBI has a program. In exchange for your labor, we can get you a new life in a new place, start you over, introduce you to some others of your kind." His face was seamed with experience and the coming depredations of age. His eyes were brittle and hard. "What kind of work?" "Does it matter?" He made a note and closed my file, then stood and smoothed his tie, one executive in a suit talking to another. "Let's just say you'll be working in the interests of national security. Nothing that'll make you lose any sleep at night." He barked a short laugh at his own joke, winked at me, and stepped to the door. He knocked, and when the door opened, my office assistant Medea stood on the other side, a badge hanging from her lapel. We nodded to each other as Bolton brushed past her. Medea smiled slightly, unconcerned that her cover was blown, and let Audrey in as she pulled the door shut behind her. Audrey's face was pale with worry. With her dark hair and eyes, she looked good pale. Perhaps it was what made me choose her all those years ago. But the frantic weakness in her eyes repelled me more than I could say. Then Dr. Keyslock's words echoed in my brain. "Never forget, Mr. Desai, that to be a man requires many difficult things. When others fail you, sometimes you must remain silent and take it. But remember how they treated you. The relationship between you has changed, and the balance has shifted. Find that new point of balance, or the relationship itself will be lost." I resolved then on my course of action. "Oh, Aaron," she sighed. She was the only one who used my first name, my Christian name. "What have they done to you?" I gave Audrey what she had been thirsting after for so many years, a trickle of that charm that had won her. I let my eyes fill with warmth and a little tragic sadness. I smiled at her, lopsided, and took her warm hands in mine. "Nothing. They haven't done a thing, my dear. But are you all okay? They haven't hurt the kids." She sobbed, seeing that I really cared, that the man inside the monster she had been caring for all these years was still there. The work had not been in vain. She laid her head on my shoulder. No, we're fine. But what are we going to do?" Her voice was muffled and broken with anxiety. I patted her back. "We'll be fine, I swear." I looked past her at the blank wall of the interrogation room. It reminded me of the blank wall of my basement that I would stare at all night, waiting for each dawn. "But I can't put you through this anymore, my loved ones. I just can't." She pulled back, alarmed. "What do you mean?" "I can't tell you. But don't worry," I assured her. "I'll always provide for you. You'll always live in a house better than the last one. You'll always have health care and a good retirement plan. I'll put the kids through college and support them till their dying days, but—" She eased in my arms, her real fears assuaged. "But I can't be with you anymore. It's too dangerous. You understand that, don't you?" "You can't? You're leaving me?" Her face was empty, her voice charged with cold shock. Her fingers tightened to claws on my chest. "That FBI agent just told me that the red shirts will burn down our house. We all have to move. But if we do it together, I'll just put my family through the same thing all over again. I'm so sorry, but I just can't do that." She blinked back her tears, her eyes now calculating and distant. Yes, I see." I smiled at her, giving her as much of my charm as she could bear. "You haven't done anything wrong. I wish things could be different." I gave her my most loving smile. "But it isn't you, Audrey. It's me." DW Draffin is a writer and actor living in San Francisco. His audiobook narration can be found at Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, and his own self-published novels can be found at Amazon and Lulu. The children's books he writes with his daughter can be found at www.smudgeprintbooks.com.
Well, that's it for the first ever guest narrator on Tall Tale TV. I want to thank DW Draffin for his amazing offer of putting this story on the channel. I really want to know what you guys thought. Is this something that I should do again, or is it something that you could do without? It's not something that I really plan to do a lot or very often, but I do want to know what you guys thought. Did you enjoy having somebody else on the channel? Just let me know. You can either leave a note down in the comments if you're on YouTube, or you can send me a message at talltaletv.com/contact. I'm Chris Herron, and that's it for today's Tall Tale TV.